Welcome back. Today we're going to talk about lesson 4.1, which is sampling methods. In this box up here, we're going to divide it into three separate compartments. The first compartment is going to take about a third here. All right, so sampling methods. What are we talking about here? Well, the sampling methods, what we're going to be looking at is ways that we can pull a group from a larger group to represent either the larger group or to represent a subset of that larger group. And so in order to kind of put some language around what it means to take samples and what it means to pull from those groups, we need to talk about, like, what do we call the big groups? What do we call the small groups? The first idea that we're going to look at here is the idea of the population. And the idea of the population is this is the entire group of individuals we want information about. So for example, if we're trying to figure out a specific something about the school, the population might be the school, and then we'd pull subsets from the school population. The other idea that we're going to look at here is what is a sample? And a sample is a subset of individuals in the population from which we collect data. And this doesn't really seem surprising, right? So the sample is the smaller group of people that we pull from a given population. Well, there are different ways to do this, and some of them are more effective than others. Some of them are ways that are going to introduce bias, and some are going to be ways that they reduce bias. So when we do something that's called a convenience sample, it is just like it sounds. It's a sample that's easy to come by. So let's say I was using that example of a population that's the school, and I'm sitting in my office and I decide, I need to figure out how are people feeling about the homecoming dance? Do they like it or not? And I walk out of my office and I walk into the freshman biology classroom and I say, hey guys, how are you feeling about the homecoming dance coming up? Well, is that a really good way to sample how the entire school population feels? Well, maybe not, because really what's happening in there is I'm conveniently walking out, finding the first room that I can go to, which happens to be freshman biology, and I'm asking that group. It's convenient for me. So you can kind of see where there could be some problems introduced by that sampling method. Though I do get feedback, it might not be the kind of feedback that I want to give a representation of the whole population. So a convenient sample is sampling individuals who are easy to reach. Another way that this might happen is, we might say, oh man, I wonder if anybody liked that movie that just came out. And you ask 5 of your friends. So you text them. You text 5 people in your phone. Did you like that movie? And let's say they say no. Well, if it, wasn't necessarily a movie that they would like, you'd get maybe a biased result about that. But at the very least, it's a convenient sample because you didn't ask random people. You didn't ask people from different demographics. It might just be your particular friend group. Another way that we can sample is called a voluntary response. And voluntary response is people who choose to be in the sample. Perfect example of this would be, I want information about the homecoming dance. I come over the intercom, I say, anyone who's interested in giving some feedback on the homecoming dance, please come to my office right now. So volunteers come to my office and they say, hey, I'd like to give some feedback about the homecoming dance. And you can imagine that might give you a cross section. It might give you a specific type of bias, right? There might be some people who are more likely to come than others. But at the very least, it's voluntary response because I didn't pick people at random. I just said, hey, anyone who wants to come on down. The best way that we know to do sampling in statistics is to do a version of this next topic, which is called simple random sampling. A simple random sample is also known as an SRS. And the key to doing a simple random sample is every group is equally likely to be chosen. And we have a baseline assumption in statistics when it says they did a simple random sample that every group was equally likely to be chosen. So how do we do this? And this is a key. This is going to be the piece that you're going to use to write about simple random sampling methods. So if they ask you to describe an experiment or describe a way that you would pick a sample out from a larger population or a larger group, you need to outline your experiment and outline your sampling method in this specific way. To conduct an SRS. Number one, you label everyone. So you label them with numbers. One, and what we normally say is 1 to big N, which means 1 until you run out of people to number. Secondly, we would randomize, which means I have, the 50 people. So let's say I numbered so I wanted to do that homecoming sample, right? And I numbered everybody in the upper school. And I said it's 1 to 212. So I went through the list and I numbered everyone 1 through 212. To randomize, then I would I'd use a random number generator, so an RNG, which is a random number generator, to pick a certain number of people. So let's say I wanted 10 people. So I'd pick 10 random numbers. Well, that order is key because when I pick those 10 random numbers, let's say it was, 1, 7, 8, 9, whatever. I've already labeled everyone, so there's no bias introduced. It's not like I picked the random numbers first and then labeled people, and I could say, oh, well, the random number generator spit out 4, and I want this student's opinion, so I give them number 4. I've already labeled everyone, so when I randomize, I'm truly picking random people. And then what I do with those random numbers is I select those people from the group. So the random number generator spits out my 10 numbers. I go back to my list of people that have been already labeled, and I pull out those 10 people. These are the steps right here. So these things are what you need to be able to do on the AP test to talk about creating a sample from a larger population, or when you start to run an experiment, simple random sample described in that way. So what did you do to randomize them? Or so what did you do to label them? What did you do to randomize them? And what did you do to select them? Let's look at a poll here. In June of 2008, Parade magazine posed the following question: should drivers be banned from using all cell phones? Readers were encouraged to vote online at parade.com. The July 13th, 2008 issue of Parade reported the results. 2,407, 85% said yes, and 410, or 15%, said no. A good way to do these check your understandings would be for you to pause the video right now. You've heard the prompt, and try this example on your own. And then after you pause and write down your answers, to come back and hear my explanation on them. So if you want to do that, go ahead and pause now. If not, I'm going to keep going through and talk about the answers. For part A, what type of sample did the Parade survey obtain? So here are my different types of samples that we talked about, either a convenient sample or a voluntary response. Let's look at what the prompt tells us happened. Readers were encouraged to vote. What does that sound like? Does that sound like it was a convenient sample? Did they walk out into the hallways of Parade magazine and grab the first 5 people that they saw and ask them? Or did they try to solicit a response and people volunteered? Well, in this case, this would be voluntary response. And it's voluntary response because the people, they volunteered. They said, hey, anybody want to answer? And the people who called in were the people that volunteered. So explain why the sampling method is biased. So let's think about what might be the problem with that. What are they asking about? They're asking about, should drivers be banned from using all cell phones? and you call in, or so you put that out there, and then you ask people to call in if they want to volunteer. What kind of people are you going to get to call in? Is the random passive Parade magazine reader going to call in? Or is it going to be people who are really passionate about this topic? They're like, I want people to hear my voice about cell phone usage. I had somebody who cut me off the other day. I am really upset about it. Or, I really think people should have their freedoms, and so they should be able to have cell phones. So I'm going to call in because I want my voice to be heard and people to know that they should be able to have cell phones. Well, it's not going to give you a good cross-section of the population because only people who are very passionate about this topic will respond. Only people really passionate about the topic will respond. Probably those who feel it should be banned, honestly. So people who think it should be banned is probably going to be those people who call in and say, I want my voice to be heard. I really think this is an issue that America needs to hear about, and I want them to be. I want my voice to be heard on this. So, is 85% likely to be greater than or less than the percentage of all adults who believe that cell phone use while driving should be banned? Why? I think it's likely greater. Because I think that people who call in are going to feel strongly will feel strongly about the topic. Okay? And people who don't care what are they going to do? They won't call. And it's important to represent those people who you don't think will really care because you want to get their opinion when you're trying to represent a population, because really there are people in the population who don't necessarily care. Question number 2. Again, if you want to pause and try this one on your own, I would encourage you to do that, and you can come back and hear my explanation. But I'm going to keep going now. To help eliminate bias, a reporter from Parade decides she will go out and ask people in person if they think drivers should be banned. So she's got this idea. She knows. She's like, okay, I know that voluntary response isn't the way. I'm going to go actually ask people. So here's what she does. She lives close to the local high school, so she goes to the parking lot at 3 p.m. and asks the first 100 people that she sees. What type of sample did this reporter obtain? Well, if it wasn't a voluntary response, what would it be? Look at our other option here. Really, this is not voluntary response. We already used that one. Voluntary response when people choose to be in the sample. This is a convenience sample. She walks down the street to a local high school. She's like, oh, there's going to be lots of people here. And so what we're going to look at is what's the problem with this? So this is really a convenience sample. And it's biased in this case because who's going to be asking, are we representing the population? That's the driving question here. Are we representing the population? This sample does not represent the population. Because most of the respondents will be students. And while they do have cell phones, they do drive, they do have an opinion on it, they're not going to be the majority, certainly, and they're not going to represent the population, most certainly. So how could Parade Magazine avoid the bias described above? So they should do a simple random sample of the population. Population. Okay, they should do a simple random sample of the population. We'll expound upon that later as we learn about more sampling methods and things like that, but at the very least, they need to do a simple random sample of the population. Guys, that's the overview of sampling methods, along with a couple different sampling method types. And so we also learned a little bit about simple random samples. So that's the video for this particular topic. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.